I recently had the opportunity to sit down with Esmeralda Mattke Longoria, who is the current occupant of Place 2 on City Council and recently announced her intent to run for re-election. I invite you to join our conversation. This is Leander. So I'm back here at Fifth Element, and we're doing the second interview in the Vote in Leander series for 2024. And I'm here with Esme Mattke Longoria, right?
Yes.
Is that the whole?
Well, my official name is Esmeralda Mattke Longoria, but
yes,
on City Council they do abbreviate it because it is a long name.
So I want to admit that was my fault because I had practiced that in my head and I forgot because I'm used to calling you Esme.
Yes.
That's the thing. It's funny because it's almost full circle because the last time we sat down and you and I sat down when you initially ran.
Yes.
I was very conscious about making sure I pronounced your name correctly, and I was very much Esmeralda. But now I'm like, oh, you're Esme. I don't even think of it that way anymore.
Well,
so
the funny
that's
thing is that some people have problems saying Esmeralda, and some people have problems saying Esme. So, strangely, Esmeralda is easier for some people. So
really?
Go with that.
Okay. All right.
And I did have a name change. I did get married, and I wanted to address that. So
no,
people have life, and they
you're
get
jumping
married.
ahead. You're getting my questions out before I even ask them. No, anyway.
Okay.
So no, and just for the record, Esme and I, after her run, we've kind of had several opportunities to work with each other. Most recently on the Economic Development Committee, which I mentioned in the last episode. You were, I think, towards the last year that I was on that particular committee, you were the council representative. So you and I have had several opportunities to talk. I don't want anybody to think that, there's anything beyond just that familiarity. We know each other from that perspective.
Yes.
And I try to stay as neutral for the conversations that we have, because what I want is that anyone who's watching or listening to the episode gets a sense of who you are. And that's really more important for me than any of the other things. And because you're an incumbent, we will talk about a few of the little other things. But outside of that, I want to just make sure that people know who you are, where you come from, how you got here, that type of thing. So,
and thank you for your service on economic development. We really rely on volunteers from the community to get involved in boards and commissions. So thank you for your service.
Yeah, no, sure. It was pleasurable while I did it. I was a little disappointing that I didn't get to re-up, but hey, it is. Everybody's got to get a chance to get in there and get their voice heard. So I'm all for that.
Thank you for chairing it.
Yeah, no, didn't want to do that either, but hey, there you go. So yeah, no, it was a good experience. I did get a lot out of it, and it's kind of helped me be able to kind of, from my perspective as a citizen, kind of get a perspective on what's actually happening within the city as far as the planning from the economic development perspective. It's really nice to have had that visibility into things, and I definitely encourage anybody who would want to be on that type of committee or even just interested in seeing what the committee does. Their meetings are quarterly now, and so if you're interested in that, show up to one of the meetings and just, I had people pop in all the time. It was always interesting. But anyway. So from that perspective, again, you're raised in Texas, right? I remember if it was Laredo, right?
Corpus
Christi. I know that was a terrible thing to say to someone from Corpus Christi.
Oh, no.
No. Okay, it was Corpus Christi. Your family had some ranch land out there, right? I remember some of those conversations from the last time. So why don't you give our listeners a little bit of a taste of where you came from?
I'm a native Texan. My family was in Texas since Texas was formed as part of a state, and so my family's been here quite a long time. We did have, and we do have ranch land still in South Texas, which is even further from Corpus Christi. So grew up in Corpus Christi. I'm one of 4 girls, 3 sisters, lots of cousins, big family, and I feel like everyone's related to me. So don't have a lot of family left in Corpus Christi anymore, but my parents live in San Antonio.
So you were, one of the things we talked about the last time, because you were a new candidate the last time you and I sat down, kind of at that point in time, I was still pretty new in Leander as well, so I was kind of getting to know a lot of people. But what I've learned since then is that, you know, there's a group of people that you can kind of, for lack of better terms, count on being somewhere involved, making their voice heard, and you quickly became part of that group, in my opinion. I mean, just it's me watching and like, hey. So you were pretty vocal on a number of things, and I know that you are very community-oriented from that perspective. So what have been some of the things that you have learned as you've served on council over the last 3 years?
So one thing is, I live on the east side of Leander, so I'm in the eastmost neighborhood in Leander. So one thing that kind of helps me is to talk to people who live on kind of central Leander where we are, or even west, just some of the pain points with the train and the timing and that kind of thing that I don't see because I'm on the east side. So my position is at large, and I just want to people to know that, right? So I serve all the citizens of Leander.
Right.
I cannot pick and choose. So when you're asking about what things I've learned, I would say there's a lot. You have to come prepared. I was a new person last time, and now I have almost 3 years experience, and it's a lot of information. It's not just coming prepared, but there are so many things that were happening. We're a growing city, one of the fastest growing cities in America, and we have water infrastructure issues, and those, you know, to quote a resident in the city, they said, we really don't have time for on-the-job training with new people, because I at least have that experience with water and being able to just prepare. I mean, the challenges of the city, it's actually more than just water, right? All the things that the boards and commissions, how the city operates, city staff. So I had a learning curve, and it was pretty steep. And 3 years later, I feel pretty confident of my work on city council and preparing for meetings. And it's not just city council 2 times a week for a volunteer position. I'm also on some other commissions, and we can talk about that later, but want to talk about what are those accomplishments and where I represent Leander.
Okay, I think that's fair. And represent Leander is part of the way that I'd like to make sure and frame the positions. It's a little bit of an easier conversation when you're talking to the mayor, because people just assume, oh, the mayor is the mayor of the city, right? But when you start to talk about the individual council members, there's not nearly as much clarity, even though, as you mentioned, it is at large, okay? So you are representing the entire 39 square miles, right? I think it is. So from that perspective, but you bring, to your point, you bring a certain perspective. Again, you are a citizen and a homeowner on the east side of the city. And the day-to-day is a little bit different there than it would be necessarily over here on the west side. It's not much space, okay? It's not a huge, giant town, but I always find that very striking because I live over here. I live closer to Fifth Element, which is maybe not such a great thing all the time, but it's different. Like just the day-to-day pace and feel of living here in Leander is a little bit different over here. So when I drive over to like Bar W, and I'm over there on the furthermost east side and kind of seeing what's going on there, it's different. It just feels different. This is a little bit older, a little bit more established as far as some of the, features and you spend a little bit more time in old Leander per se, than necessarily in the newer parts. So again, the other part of that is that, of course, as a council member, it is a volunteer position. There's no ad valorem or anything like that. You guys are doing this because this is how you volunteer your time. You just had to go through the process of letting people pick you to volunteer your time, right?
Yes.
So,
and I'm happy to say I'm really proud that I've missed one regular city council meeting in almost 3 years. So I'm dedicated, and a lot of times I won't fault some of my fellow city council members from other cities, but they're saying, hey, we don't get paid. So maybe some people may not put in the effort. I'm not calling out anyone's names, but that's not me. I'm the type of person that is dependable, hardworking. I'm going to put in the effort. Proud to say I've only missed one regular city council meeting, and I come prepared, and it's a lot of work.
It is, and I'm glad you brought that up because, again, From the perspective of what the accomplishments are from a council member's perspective, again, council is charged with, some principal focus. Number one being the budget. Number two being the various rules and regulations, for lack of better terms, that the city runs with. And then number three, and probably not in order, but number three would be giving guidance to the staff and understanding the particulars of the operation of the city. So when you started, like when you and I first had a conversation, one of the things that you mentioned in our interview a couple years ago was as a newbie coming on, you were a little bit concerned about housing and the affordability of housing and the availability of housing. Mm-hmm. So let's look at that from a perspective of like a marker. So you came to council with a feeling, and it's one of the things that I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say one of the motivators that you said, I have to get involved, right? That was one of the things. So using that as your marker, do you feel that in the ensuing years there's been an improvement in that particular area? And if so, how do you feel that your participation, your piece helped with that?
Definitely, I think that housing is still a challenge. The city council gets kind of blamed a lot of times for building apartments, and some of those were approved before I was on city council, so they're just a long time coming. As with everything in America, everything's gone up in price. That means it takes longer for our developers to build some of these apartments. So they weren't necessarily approved under me. I would say that this council is mindful of growing commercial. That has been our focus. So commercial, and we still get dinged a little bit from that perspective because residents say, oh, but water and apartments and commercial, but we do need to expand our tax base to be able to provide for those water infrastructure projects that take a lot of money and are needed as we grow the city to possibly 175,000 to 200,000.
Right.
And what does that look like?
Right. And it's a really good point from that perspective because again, those key issues don't necessarily change in that short period of time. I mean, part of what you ran for, if I remember correctly, was adding some additional voices to the mix. I think you were concerned at the time that not enough representation was on the council at that particular time. Again, we're talking about 3 years ago, but
listen, one of the reasons I ran was government transparency. At the time that I was running, one thing that really bothered me as a resident was that residents could not do public comments. That was really at the highest part of my list. And I've impacted change on that. So, and when I say I'm one of 7, right?
Right.
So
Right.
I can only do that with working with others. But as far as government transparency, we were able to bring back public comments, bring back the library rentals, and those things that people asked for that said, that is not right. We really want to be able to express ourselves in public comments. And I believe in the Constitution and people's right to express themselves, freedom of speech. And excuse my voice, I have allergies.
No, that's all right. No worries. I know, but no one will tell. you just
I'm on the record now because I always boast I never have allergies. So
okay. Here we are. All right. So yeah, you hit on a couple of things there that I think that are important, and I would tend to agree with you from the perspective of, there were some limitations as to what you could do as just a general citizen in Leander, and I don't want to say that has dramatically changed because there's been changes for the positive, but I still think there are natural impediments, natural barriers to that are no fault of anybody, okay? You have a city that goes from 20, 30,000 people to 80,000 people literally almost overnight. You're going to have growing pains, and that's one of the growing pains. I've applaud the council in this past term because they've started to address some of those things, and some of the way that they're addressing it is very visible and very transparent. Is it 100% there? In my opinion, no. But you can see the changes are being made. So I think that's that bodes well for the city as in a long term. Can't remember who it was, but it was in one of the committee meetings. We had a guest speaker, and one of the things that he mentioned was when you are in public service, you're only there for a short period of time. The city keeps going. Like, the city never stops. That goes on and on and on and on and on. So whatever you do in that one little period of time that you're there, it could have some impact, 5-10 years down the road. But again, eventually something else is going to replace that. Something else is going to be part of that conversation. And for us here in Leander, again, you hit on a couple of the main things. So from that perspective, I think that's kudos, because I think the council has done a good job, and I know that you're one of the voices in that.
Are we there yet? As a
No.
perfection?
No.
And I will just say that when I ran last time, I was probably just a normal citizen. Yes, I was involved in the community as much as I could be, but I started noticing what the city council was doing, and then I wanted to get involved. So I applaud people who want to get involved and who do put themselves out there for running, and it's not easy, and we try to be as transparent as possible, but there are a lot of rules around open meetings and what we're
Sure.
able to do.
Sure.
And so.
Yeah, no, and again, you're hitting on some things that are like, that's experience that tells you that, because I can reflect the exact same thing. All right, I'm not even on council. All right, but with any of the involvement I've had in committees, as the city has matured in an understanding of how things are supposed to be done, they've also kind of emphasized some of the things that are necessary to do it right. So you mentioned open meetings laws and things of that nature. Those are pretty restricting at the end of the day. It's nobody's fault. It's the legislature. That's just how the legislature has chosen to do it whenever they chose to do it. A good example of something that was done several years ago that's now like, here are the ramifications of this decision we made many years ago. But it does restrict what you can say, how you can say it, and how often you can necessarily, have an open conversation about something, because there are some legal limitations. That said, again, I think the city does a better job of representing what they do. I want to pivot a little bit there, because one of the things that I know you've had some experience with now was something that actually I became aware of probably a few years ago, more like municipal leagues and things of that nature. And I think CapCog is one of those, and I believe
Yes.
that you're participating on that now, right? Is that as a city representative, or is that you independently saying, hey, I'm going to do this?
As a city representative. So I am on the executive committee for CapCog, and CapCog is the Capital Area Council of Governments, and for their region specifically, they support 10 counties. So I think most people and most of your listeners know that Leander falls in 2 counties, Travis and Williamson County. So 2 of our counties are in the CapCog 10 county area. So what CapCog does is regional planning, and they address solid waste, law enforcement training, clean air, and I'm part of the Clean Air Coalition. They also do area aging. So the Meals on Wheels, everything that's funded, approved for this 10 county region goes through CapCog. 911 fees, emergency communications, how we take our 911 calls. So how I got involved in this is, the mayor, when I first joined council, Becky was asked to do Cap Metro, and I would have done that one too, or there was water, and I think Nicole picked that one. And I really wanted to get involved with CapCog. So I have experience with government. I was a state employee. I worked with some of these state agencies, Texas Department of Human Services, Health and Human Services, and all those state agencies work with CapCog. And so I am a representative on the executive committee. I'm also on the General Assembly, and Mayor Delisle and Councilmember Thompson are also on the General Assembly. So the General Assembly is just a larger group, and it's various city council members. It's also county commissioners. So people have different roles. And then I'm on the executive committee, which is comprised of judges, county commissioners, city council members, and I represent large cities, I believe over 25,000, but there's only so many spots for different cities representing. We have Pflugerville on there and Round Rock, but not every city around here is represented there, just because there's only so many slots
Right.
per population.
Right.
So I'm also on the clean air, and clean air is important to me. So we approve funding for devices in the county, in that county region that is monitors air quality.
So
And there's a lot to air quality.
right.
so-
No, I would imagine. I mean that. So what that makes me want to ask is that, okay, so there's some additional time commitments to something like that. So, when you're running for council, again, you're essentially saying, hey, I want to volunteer here, but because of the way that particular volunteer position is constructed, you have to be the person that people elect to that position. But it is essentially a volunteer position. I mean, there's no way about it otherwise. That's what it is. So you're making a commitment to, it's bi-weekly council meetings, right? So twice a month you're prepping for council meetings.
Sometimes we do have some more than twice a month.
There are special meetings. I've
meetings
seen
helps.
that. I've seen that. Okay. You also had, for instance, a time commitment to the Economic and Development Committee, because you would show up to our monthly meetings.
Yes.
And then you're doing CapCog on top of that, which how often does
The
that
executive
meet?
committee meets once a month.
Okay.
And then Clean Air meets quarterly, I believe. And I'm also the council liaison for area aging, and I believe that's quarterly that they meet as well.
Okay.
But it is a time commitment, and it is driving to South Austin, and because the 10-county area, it is widespread.
Right. So, okay, so these are all these commitments that if I were to say, hey, Esme, did you know about that before you ran? What would you say?
I would say no.
Okay.
I didn't know how much time was needed. And so now, after almost 3 years, I know it takes a huge commitment.
Mm-hmm.
So I applaud anyone who puts themselves out there who may not know, but it is a lot of time involved. It's not just going to those 2-hour meetings. It's preparing for those 2 hours. They're not 2 hours.
Twice a month. Yeah, twice a month for council. You're preparing for your monthly meetings on the exec. You're preparing for quarterly meetings on a couple of the other things that you do.
And our regular city council meetings usually run from 6 to 10. So for a volunteer
When you're
position, we're lucky if it ends at 10.
You're lucky if it ends at 10.
Yes.
I've seen several of those go over. But so yeah, again, it's a big time commitment, but you have a regular job like you, or, I think you're still at Dell, right?
No, I'm currently
You're not Dell?
looking for my next employment.
Oh, okay.
I'm unemployed, but still going to be in the IT field. And one thing that is valuable for your listeners and watchers to know is that what I do for a living is very much like city planning. So I am a project manager, program manager, business architect. So usually when people ask, well, what does a business architect do? I would approve projects in a portfolio for multi-million-dollar companies from an IT perspective, IT projects. But how that relates to city is it's very much approving the budget, approving which projects we do, making sure that we are managing those timelines. Now, day to day, I won't manage city staff, and I will, I think most people know, but we cannot tell city staff what to do, so everything goes through the city manager, because that's just the way of our type government. But we need to make sure, I need to be prepared to ask those questions on timeline, expectations, are we meeting those timelines? Because my brain just is a project manager, and my kids, I'm a mom too. I got to project manage kids, right?
Yeah.
Have you done your tasks?
Yeah. No, I get it. I now more so than a few years ago, because I've always been, personally, I've always been in sales related roles throughout my career. And there's a modicum of planning in that, but it's really more methodology than it is necessarily planning. However, I too have kind of pivoted a little bit in my career, and I've been doing essentially project management for the last few years, which gives me a better understanding of, okay, what are the complexities of what it is that you're trying, anything that you're trying to do. Again,
just to say that one of the reasons I ran as well is because I saw these projects not being delivered. We're talking the senior center was voted on by bonds by our residents and just was being stalled, frankly, by previous councils. So as a project manager, I wanted to make sure, let's push those projects that make financial sense. I'm not saying let's approve all projects. I'm saying let's evaluate them and see if we spent money. For the senior center, it was a no-brainer. Somebody had donated land. Let's get that built. The longer we delay, and unfortunately, previous councils had delayed that, and now here we are that everything's more expensive in America,
right.
As I said, right? So now we don't have enough for the senior center, and it's out for bid right now, so we're making progress on these project completions, I would say, and just being able to push those projects through that makes sense to push through, if you will.
Right. So project management speak from that perspective, address the backlog, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And
so.
if it doesn't make sense, then move it back to the backlog.
Right.
And let's work on things that we have active funding for. Let's be creative in what we're able to do. I mean, are we able to get grants that are going to help us? And we've been able to do that. A lot of people don't know this. With Cap Metro, I know it was kind of a heated discussion, pretty divided with our city on voting for Cap Metro, but people are not aware that with our interlocal agreement, Cap Metro is giving back $1.6 million in projects around here that are related to transportation. So we're trying to be creative and work smarter with the money that we have.
And I think that's always, it's easy to sit outside of that equation and say, well, why can't we just do it this way? Or why don't we just get out of this? And let's take the money from over here. But the reality of that is that it's much, much more complex and much, much more convoluted than most people will take the time to understand. And again, I like having the ability to have these conversations. It's one of the nice things about being in a community that's not, 5 million people, in that, my efforts can grant me an opportunity to sit down with someone like yourself or someone like the mayor, or any of the candidates who will want to do this. Again, it's not as a perspective of like, well, how qualified are you to do this? Although there is an aspect of that. I think it's fair to ask those questions. But it's also like, do you understand what it is that you are going to need to do? Which, for me, and again, for my listeners, this is the nice thing about being able to come back to someone like yourself, who I've interviewed previously, and you were the shy girl who was running for council, and it was like,
I'm an introvert.
It was like pulling teeth. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, and you were very nervous, and that's totally understandable. But again, with time, you're more comfortable. It's very obvious to me that you're much more comfortable in what it is that you're doing, and
I love being on City Council.
I can tell. And I mean, honestly, I mean that in the most sincere way, because when I look at council members, and I can't say that I would, rank them. That's not fair. But what I look for is, how representative are you? How often do I see you at the things, okay? And I was looking over your new website for re-election, and you have a bunch of pictures on there about things that you've done. And I've been to a lot of those. I remember seeing you at those things. So the community outreach aspect of being a representative, I think, is critical.
We didn't even talk about that and how much time
we have.
takes.
That's why I'm bringing it up, because on top of all those other things that we kind of delineated for time consumption, you have to not have to, but I think it's important that you do these other things too. Show up to the parade, show up to the openings. I don't think it's reasonable for us as citizens to ask volunteers to be at everything. So the expectation,
it's pretty impossible.
It's impossible. There's too many.
I have to say that most ribbon cuttings happen at 3 or 4 p.m. And so I support the chamber, love them, but I'm not able to go because I work full time.
Yeah.
So a lot of the council commitments are during 8 to 5 work hours. So it definitely is kind of geared towards somebody who doesn't have a full-time job. And like I said, right now I don't have a full-time job, so I can go to more of those events. But I feel like I have still managed to juggle that career, being a mom, being a city council member. It is work-life balance, right?
Sure. No, absolutely. And again, I think the emphasis in this particular interview has been that time commitment, because each council, there's 7 council members in total, right? 6 six at-large positions in the mayor.
Yes.
And the mayor always kind of separate a little bit because there's some leadership aspect to that role that you're more senior project manager, if anything. Okay, so you're kind of like, all right, well, what are we doing? But all the other council members should be, in my opinion, this is me speaking. I'm not speaking for anybody, nor is this a representative of your view. But there's an expectation that as a representative, I should be able to talk to you. Like, I should be able to reach out to you. I should be able to get some opportunity to at least express myself. And that B, that is something I hear, that's something I see when I'm looking at those representatives. And I think that's important for people to consider. Again, it's fair to say there's an aspect of a popularity contest in these types of things, okay? Name recognition, visibility is all part of that. I'm not one to, be so naive to the process to not actually recognize, hey, that's part of the process.
And look, it's our job as representatives for the city to listen to all residents in the city. I may not agree with them. They may not agree with me. They just may not like me for whatever reason. I can't change that, but I'm here to listen, and that's why we restore public comments. And I do enjoy when people do engage in civic behavior and come to our city council meetings. And so before you're throwing darts or being couch potato, wait, I forget the football reference.
Yeah, right.
Armchair quarterback.
Armchair quarterback, yeah.
It's easy to throw darts at what we do
Sure.
without knowing all the information. And I get that. I was one of those people who threw darts and said, you know what, I think I can do better. And if that city council had been doing what I thought was their job, I wouldn't have ran. Mm-hmm. If you would have asked me 10 years ago, and I might have said this last time, I would not have predicted I would run.
Right.
I'm an introvert by nature, but
Right.
I think you need those diverse people on city councils. If you have a 7 panel with all extroverts, things might not get done. I'm not saying extroverts don't, because they clearly have project management skills, but what I'm saying is I'm going to lean into being an extrovert or introvert, and my husband will say I'm an extrovert because I talk too much, but it really is dependent on who I'm talking to.
Absolutely.
I like to be quiet on city council meetings and ask relevant questions. I'm not there just to talk. I'm there to bring up a question that I think a resident in the city would ask. And you're right, it's easy to throw darts, but they don't have how the sausage is made, and that is difficult. And that comes with experience and 3 years of experience, and I feel like I have that.
No, I would say yes to all of the above, because again, I have the perspective of somebody who has watched that progress for you as a council member from 3 years ago when you were running to now. And again, we've had the opportunity, and again, all disclaimers, we've had the opportunity to interact on a number of conversation points as well as potential projects for the city. And it's always something that I've been struck with when talking to you, is that you, and this is not meant to be a bad thing, this is a good thing, you don't answer right away. You don't. You have a tendency to let me find out about that.
I'm an introvert.
It's one of those things. And I'm like, at first I was like, wait, but
listen before I speak.
No,
but see, I'm clearly interrupting, so.
It's fine. No, again, we know each other, so it's okay. But no, from that perspective, I think it's something that brings a very unique approach to some of the conversations that need to take place on council. You don't come in with an opinion, I think, is fair. I don't know if you may be formulating an opinion, you may be formulating an idea, but you're not overt in driving that as a cause. You're not banging the gavel right away. You're waiting to hear what other people have to say about something before you're actually speaking in a representative
And I
manner.
think that's important when I'm talking about people coming to city council, because a lot of people do actually watch online. So thank you for watching online if you do. But I think it's important to go there and speak, and you get 3 minutes to speak. So I do like to listen to both sides. So we have quite a few neighborhood issues where we had to close 177. That road is really treacherous, and we listened to the neighbors. And as a council, we came together, and I would say over the past year to two, this council has been unanimous on a lot of decisions. And so that shows me that we work together. But what I would ask the public is come to our city council meetings, get your voice heard, and go in front of city council. And it can be a little intimidating to be in front of 7 people who are sitting above you. I kind of wish we were at the same level as people, but
yeah, the dais can be a little intimidating. I'll cop to that. I've spoken in front of council a couple of times, and in certain instances I'm fine, but there's been, I think, at least one topic, I can't remember what it was specifically, but I got really nervous. I do not understand that to this day, because obviously I'm not the kind of guy who gets really nervous.
Right.
You know?
It can be an
But
intimidating environment.
it was funny. It's funny how that...
And I try to put people at ease when they're up there. I try to smile at them. And look, I may not agree with every resident in the city, and I bet you I don't. But if there's a neighborhood issue, like the closing 177, we listened to the neighbors and came to that decision. So I do like to have that point of view of come to city council and tell us what is bothering you. If not, we're not going to know. Send us an email. We do read our emails, and our emails are public record, so people can look at our emails, do public requests, open records requests, and so I encourage people to get involved and to be able to tell us what they want. Because if I see something that's on a neighborhood, and nobody's saying anything about it, I'm going to think that everything's great and there's no issue. But if people come to city council, they can get their view heard, and I think that's really a nonpartisan thing. I mean, that is... we make decisions listening to the community. Yeah,
and it's a good point, because again, local decision making, local politics is not the same thing, nor should it be conflated with some of the larger political conversations that take place. Unfortunately, that happens. It's just part of, I think, the culture here in the United States. It's a cultural thing. For a group of people, like not everybody. There's a culture here that there's a whole lot of people who just don't care and just go about their daily business.
And there's a culture that people make assumptions about politicians, right?
Sure.
At the end of the day, I'm a politician, so people can make decisions about that without knowing Esme the person.
Right.
So you're right. It's a little divided, but at the end of the day, local politics should not be partisan. Local politics is fixing stoplights, and I'm happy to say that that's one thing I ran on too, fixing these uncompleted projects. We were able to install 2 lights at Sunny and Baghdad and Ronald Reagan and Hero Way. And really, public safety is important to me. CapCog is very much more on the safety side of things, and that's why I wanted to get involved in things like CapCog, because I have that government experience, and it is a nonpartisan environment, and it was a passion for mine to learn more about those items that CapCog does.
Well, and again, to me, it underscores a willingness and a desire to understand the complexities of the issues. A lot of the issues in my mind, I try to be here in the podcast, and when I have just general conversations, and it's really more, well, we need to zoom out a little bit, right? Okay, we need to look at it like, all right, what's the overall influencers in this one particular issue, and how much can we necessarily do about it? You can only control the controllables, right? You can only control what it is that's actually within your purview to control. Everything outside of that...
Well, that brings a good point, because the state legislature has really passed a lot of laws where we cannot intervene in certain cases. So at the city level, our hands are tied to do some things. And so we try to be transparent when people come to city council saying, we can't block this from being developed because it's already been approved, and we can, it's just the way the state government has limited cities' rights. And we do get involved in that too, to see what are those changes that are going on at the state legislature that's going to impact our city.
No, and it is one of the points that, again, I think this came up when I was talking to Christine a couple of weeks ago, but it's an understanding of some of those fundamentals as far as governance is concerned. And to me, it's one of the points where I don't opine on a whole lot, but it is one of the opinions that I held and that I will be very public about, is like, look, your council is not the people that you need to look at if you need to really want to make a change that's substantive. You need to look at your state representatives, okay? Because they're the ones that are actually influencing any legislation that's going on. And, there's a lot in this state that happens. I mean, I remember at one point looking at the, what was essentially the state constitution and the way that Texas is done. Correct me if I'm wrong, because you might know this, but basically we amend the Constitution with every single thing that we do. Every legislative setting is adding additional complexity to the state constitution. Essentially, they're not separate laws. They all flow back into the constitutional purview of the state of Texas, which I find tremendously interesting, tremendously complex, and I would argue probably the wrong way to do things. It makes things a lot harder than they necessarily need to be. I think it's on purpose. That's my opinion. But, hey, it is what it is.
It is what it is.
Right.
And back to open meetings, that's one thing. It's those levers that the state has decided we don't want the cities to do. And some of it is for the benefit of the residents, to not being able to have all city council members talk about an agenda item. That's part of open meetings. But some of it is a little too detrimental and too, it really makes it where the city council cannot make a decision. And that's unfortunate. And we usually relay that to our residents, saying this is a case where we cannot do it.
Right. It is restrictive. I mean, again, I've had some experience with that even just on a committee. It just becomes very difficult to get anything done. Again, I think that's by design. And maybe there's a little bit of thought put into that, in that you don't end up with a bunch of runaway ideas. Everything's kind of reined in a little bit. So there's some benefit to it from that perspective. But I do agree that I think
there's plus and minuses.
Yeah,
sure.
it definitely has. I'd say a little bit more on the minus side, but that's just me. Okay, that's just me.
There's
but anyway,
a lot of people in this community who say, "Oh, why are we not doing that development? Why is that stopped?" And I think it's more of how the sausage is made, and what you're saying, they don't have the full picture of what the city council can affect for change. I mean, if I approve a business and then they cannot get the funding to do their project, that's not the city council. That's
right.
That's
right.
Like I said, in America, things have gotten a lot more expensive.
Yep.
People are going to the grocery store. It's more expensive. Believe me, unemployed now, I understand. It's very difficult to live. But also, these builders, these developers, I mean, if they have to build a location, everything's just going to cost more.
Mm-hmm.
To do the development, to do the construction, it's going to cost more. So I find it interesting when people say, well, why is this project not done, when it really is that business didn't do what they were supposed to do, or if we gave them an incentive and they did not meet their deadlines. I don't think that should be the city council's fault. That really should be taking accountability from businesses. And I support local businesses, but there's a lot involved, right? So I think the city council gets a lot of discord, I guess, or
yeah. I mean, we did talk
being upset.
We talked a little bit about this in the last episode as well. The thing is that and you're bringing up an additional aspect to that. Again, it's a complex conversation. The developers who have been approved to do a project, there's a lot of complexity that they need to navigate as a developer outside of what the city is necessarily asking for. Now, the city will create avenues that are addressing larger ideas and larger needs for the city, and they'll also prevent developers from just going bananas and just doing whatever they want to do, which I'm not saying anybody's doing that, but there's a balance there,
guardrails, right?
Right, it's guardrails. And then I know that a lot of times in conversations I've had, developers will say, hey, this is one of the hardest places to do a project. It's hard to do business in Leander. That's reasonable.
And on that note, we have made a lot of changes as far as streamlining the development process. So there are positive changes on that. It's just that at the end of the day, once they're past a certain point and that company doesn't develop, that's not the city council's fault. That's like, why didn't you develop? And maybe there's other hurdles beyond what we can control, right? Things got more expensive. I think like for the knife manufacturer, things just got more expensive for them. And it's kind of a bad time in America since 2020 to 2024, right? And hopefully the economy improves, but here we are when you really need that money to build that and you don't have it. What are you going to do? As far as people saying Leander is difficult to do, I think this city council specifically has addressed that over the past 2 years for streamlining development. Now, we did a sign ordinance, and nothing's perfect, and so you're going to have things that do take time, and there are certain projects that need more approvals on different things that are outside of the city council's purview, like you're saying.
Right. And where I was going with that was that you as the face, if you will, of the franchise, the visible person, the representative, right? One of 7, that you do absorb a little bit of the brunt of any kind of complaint. You also are the one who is recipient of some of the accolades as well. And we talked about this in the last episode, that the staff is largely responsible for the actual work that gets done. And again, council can provide guidance and can provide the direction, but the staff still needs to execute on that. You add that to the fact that the developers who come in and get the approval, and then that they need to go to their shareholders or their investors, and then they need to get that. So there's a lot of complexity to that. It's a lot of moving parts. It's not a simple matter. And I do think that there are opportunities to hold people a little bit more accountable in that process. Mm-hmm. I do feel, again, my opinion, that has gotten better, that it has improved in the time that I've been in Leander. I've been here almost 6 years. And so I've seen an improvement in that, and that's a growth thing because, again, you're dealing with a city that was, relatively small, in the scheme of things, that just exploded. It's still experiencing explosive growth. It's slowed down a little bit from a couple of years ago, but it's still one of the fastest growing cities in the nation,
and
not even just the
state. One thing I hear is there's not a lot of restaurants in Leander, and I've seen it myself, but you've been part of economic development, so you know that there are quite a few things coming, so that's great news. We're getting a cava. I think the mayor said we're going to get Dutch Brothers. There's Torchy's on the east side of town. So there's restaurants coming, and so it's going to help not just with the growth of the city, but we talked about this last time. We want to keep our children here to be able, but how can they live here if it's not affordable? We want them to be able to work and live here. Now, we understand people go off to college, but we want to have these restaurants so people can have teenage employment, right?
Right.
We want to be able to fuel that part of our economy.
Absolutely. And it's, again, a really, really good point that I think people would overlook, generally speaking. Again, the conversation is like, well, I remember, why don't we have a Whataburger in Leander? And I'm like, that is not, to me, personally, it's not a signpost, okay? That's something that's going to happen. And, if Whataburger does a market study and they decide that, hey, here's where I need to put that particular restaurant, that's going to happen. I think that holds true for a lot of the other things that we mentioned from that perspective.
And we're getting a Home Depot.
But people don't think about the underlying employment piece of that. That's where I'm going with that. Like, you made a very good mention there. And I think, the kids that are working at Whataburger or Dairy Queen or, the coffee place or whatever, those are kids that would not have opportunity to have those jobs in the city that they live in, right?
And look, it's not just about those kids too.
Right.
When I'm talking about teenage employment, but
there's other
in America.
Absolutely,
we have this side gig mentality, unfortunately, because people are not able to live on the income that they had from their primary job. So we have a kind of side gig, whether you're delivering for Favor, delivering for DoorDash, or working at a second job, or we're going to have more jobs around here.
Even just, stay-at-home mom who, wants a little bit of a break, for lack of better terms, from, the kids. Like, hey, I'm going to work a part-time job. I'm going to pick up 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours doing XYZ, whatever the XYZ is. I think those are all things that a lot of people overlook when you are talking about this overall holistic machine that is being kind of built as we go. I think we do a better job of planning out which Lego pieces we're adding.
Right.
I
think one thing is that we really need primary employers in Leander. Something like Samsung we couldn't do because of their water needs, and Taylor's probably going to struggle with water, but we need primary employers. We need those big companies coming, but at the end of the day, they're going to look at how is the city functioning, how's the development process, does the city council get along? And unfortunately, the answer was no recently on that. We may huge strides on that, but companies do look for that thing. They look for those things. They
Sure.
look to see if we're inclusive because they want their employees to live here. They also are looking at housing.
Mm-hmm.
So they're looking at housing, and like something like the knife manufacturer, which I talked about that fell through, right? But they were looking at housing for their employees. People want to live and work here, and we can't do that unless we have primary employers, and we need that development to fund our projects as well.
Yeah, no, again, it's a diversification of the tax base. We talked about this in the last episode too, that, the conversations of, how the feel and the small town and all that stuff, those are great. And I don't want to discount that, because there is a feeling that you want to get from your home. I mean, I think...
Well, Leander has a character. I mean, we're right across from Old Town, and that's uniquely that small town feel.
Right.
But as we go into a big city, how can we keep that small town feel,
Sure,
if you will?
Sure, and I think it's important that you're emphasizing feel, because you can have the feel of a small town, but you can't approach a larger city with a small town mentality. And I think we've seen some changes that I think are positive from that perspective. I think they would have happened anyway, but it's nice to have had, for the last few years, a council that was at least looking at this and saying, okay, how do we solve for these issues in a way that it's conducive to the long-term growth of the city. Kind of take me back to that thing I said earlier. The city keeps going. Like, you and I,
it's moving.
It's a little piece of influence. We'll be there for a few years, and then someone else will step into that
Yes.
role, and that's that. And that's great. And that's what volunteerism
But it's
is
about
about.
planning.
Sure. It's about leaving it. I said this to Christine because we talked about, the Economic Development Committee. My job as the chair of that committee was to leave it better than how I found it. And I hopefully did that. Time will tell.
Hopefully everyone has
Right.
that mindset.
I mean, that's what you should do. I mean, again, this civic-minded and this kind of, we can call it political, but it's a civics. It's an exercise in civics. The political aspect, I think, complicates it. But the exercise in civics is you're interested, you're engaged, and you want to make sure that you leave it better than where you found it. And not saying that it was terrible when you found it, just you can be better and you can always improve.
I think
right?
that's a problem that sometimes people think, I don't want to be a large city. Well, that is beyond our
That
control.
ship sailed.
That ship has sailed. And can we keep that small town feel? Yes, I think we can. But at the same time, you have to be planning for the future.
Mm-hmm.
If our past city councils had planned correctly, we probably wouldn't be in the water situation that
Right,
we're in.
right.
Unfortunately, and this council has been doing a good job of pushing those projects forward for water to ensure that when we do have that population in 2027, we're able to meet their water needs.
Right. And again,
Yeah.
that's the plan. There are a series of uncontrollable things around that too. It stops raining for 5 years, so then what are you going to do, right? We're going to run out of water.
But the pipeline repairs were part of planned activity, and
Right.
we just are trying to express that to our residents. We know it's painful for no outdoor watering for 6 weeks, and that's coming up. But we need to do that, to do those pipeline repairs.
Sure. I mean,
It's necessary.
it's with an eye to the future. And with that eye to the future, I know you yesterday kicked off your campaign.
Yes.
So if you want to tell folks how to find you, like
sure.
where would they go? We're right here, so you can just...
Oh, okay. I think I've been looking at the wrong camera.
No, that's
Okay.
fine. No worries.
So I had my kickoff campaign yesterday, or my campaign kickoff. Excuse my, I still have a head cold. So Esme for Leander is my website. So you can go to www.esmeforleander.com. My website is in Spanish as well. And learn more about me. My son edited my website, so I do need to go add more pictures and talk about things. But I do have what I've been focused on and what I'm going to focus on in the upcoming years. So you can go to esmeforleander.com, request a sign. You can email me, and donations are needed and required to run a campaign. It's pretty expensive, and everything else has gone up in price in 3 years. But look, I hate asking people for money, but it's a necessary evil to run a campaign, and so.
Well, thank you
you.
very much. I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me here today.
Thank
I
you.
wish you, as I do all the candidates, nothing but success and luck going forward. And I
you.
certainly hope that those of you who are listening and watching can appreciate some of the approach that we're taking here to give you a little bit of a different view of some of the people who are the movers and shakers in Leander,
No,
so to
thank you,
speak.
Andrew. I mean, this is beneficial so everyone in the community can see just what the city council candidates are, what's their mindset, if you will.
Yep, no, that's
So
what I'm
thank
hoping
you.
for.
Thank
No,
you
no,
for having it.
no, thank you for being here. I couldn't do it without you. I could sit here and talk about all that stuff and I have no one to talk to, so thanks. But again, I appreciate the time. Thank you so very, very much.
And thank you for having this at a local business. And I actually support this business, Fifth Element.
Yeah, no, for
you
sure. A
wanna
little
give a shout out
commercial
to
there.
them?
Yeah, Mike Brunet has been just extremely kind in allowing us to be here and do this here at Fifth Element. It makes it a lot easier when we have one place to go. The camera setups can stay consistent. I don't have to worry about lighting. There's a lot goes into that. But yeah, Mike, thanks a lot. And we still have to work on that
Come
commercial.
grab a beer at
Yep.
Fifth Element.
Come on out.
Great place. The owners are super great, and I support local businesses. And my husband brews beer at home, so he likes beer. So we do come here.
Yeah, like I said, it's really close to my house, so I do tend to be here myself. Probably, again, maybe a little too
Thanks
often.
again
but-
for your time.
No, I appreciate it. And hopefully this has been helpful to you as a voter. Again, you can go to voteinleander.com and register to vote if you haven't already registered, as well as find additional links and information on upcoming elections and the city races as well. I'll be updating the website here shortly. As soon as all the candidates are official, then I'll go ahead and put that information there for you as well. But you know where to find Esme, and you know where to find me. So we'll see you next time, and I hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. Thanks a lot, folks.
Y'all.
All right, and we're done.